the gun in the prison. The only thing that makes sense would have been for him to have produced the gun in court.
And when Jackson left the visiting room, was he properly searched by guards before returning to the adjustment center?
So I don't know whether we'll ever know what really happened on that day. It was a moment of horror.
As for the gun, state investigators discovered that the 9mm Astra automatic used by Jackson was purchased at an El Cerrito gun shop 2 years earlier by a member of the Black Panthers. How Jackson obtained the gun was a mystery. Was it smuggled into the prison by a friend, a guard, or his attorney, Stephen Bingham?
That there is no way Jackson could have obtained the death gun except during his visit with attorney Stephen Bingham just before the killings started.
Prison officials and Marin County authorities believed the gun used by George Jackson was passed to him by Stephen Bingham. According to Bingham, after leaving San Quentin, he spent the rest of the day with family and in meetings. When he learned the news from friends later that evening, Bingham was shocked.
It was clearly horrible, the whole thing. I mean, it was just that many people had been killed.
Bingham was also terrified, filled with fear.
That's my state of mind, and the next step to feeling framed is I could be killed.
Stephen Bingham fled the country, became a fugitive from justice, and went into hiding in Europe. Bingham and 6 inmates from San Quentin's adjustment center would be charged with murder and conspiracy.
Because of our unsuccessful efforts, the state's unsuccessful efforts to locate Mr. Bingham within California, he will be now sought by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
In March of 1972, Soledad brothers John Clouchet and Fleta Drumgo were acquitted by an all-white jury for the death of guard John Mills. In a Santa Clara County courtroom in June of the same year, Angela Davis was found not guilty of the charges of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Davis denied the prosecution's allegations that she engaged in plotting and arming the kidnap attempt and subsequent shooting led by Jonathan Jackson. Davis called her acquittal the happiest day of her life. 3 years later, in July of 1975, at the Marin County Hall of Justice, opening arguments were presented in the trial for the 6 inmates charged with murder and assault in the George Jackson incident. The accused were Johnny Spain, Hugo Pinnell, Fleta Drumgo, Willie Tate, David Johnson, Luis Talamentes. They became known as the San Quentin Six. Security for their trial was extremely tight. The courtroom had a bulletproof partition, and some of the defendants were in chains, shackled to their chairs. There was also a visit by the jury to the scene of the crime.
The courtroom came to the prison today. Judge, jurors, defendants, attorneys, everyone.
Alan Mancino was among those called to testify. The prosecutor questioned Mancino about the statement he signed days after the deadly riot.
He says, "Is this statement true?" I said, "Not." I said, "That was a prepared statement. I got tired of being beat." I said, "You got the wrong guys." And I didn't just do it to screw the state. Some of them guys were innocent. I mean, straight up innocent. They didn't do nothing. And they were scared as anybody else in there, you know?
Can you say who that was?
No, I can't.
The parade of witnesses included the surviving guards, Kenneth McCrae, Urbano Rubiaco, and Charles Breckenridge. Each man offered damaging testimony. Defense attorneys said they lied. The trial lasted almost a year. In August of 1976, the jury reached its verdict. Johnny Spain was the only defendant convicted of murder, found guilty in the killings of guards Frank De Leon and Jerry Graham. Spain, who was also a Black Panther and had run from the adjustment center with George Jackson, did not testify on his own behalf. Spain received 2 life sentences. Hugo Pinnell was found guilty of assaulting 2 guards, Urbano Rubiaco and Charles Breckenridge. David Johnson was found guilty of assault. He was released from prison because of time already served. Willie Tate, Luis Talamentes, and Fleta Drumgo were acquitted. The controversial and complicated criminal trial of the San Quentin Six was the longest in California history. It was also the most expensive to prosecute. The state had spent over $2 million.
I have never really lived.
In the years after the killing of the 3 Black inmates at Soledad Prison, the trail of blood and revenge led to the deaths of at least a dozen others, inside prison and beyond. Fleta Drumgo, who was released from jail in 1976, was shot dead in the streets of Oakland 3 years later. Police called the killing a gangland-style execution. Attorney Faye Stender, the true believer who fought for George Jackson's freedom and made him a cause célèbre, became another victim in May of 1979 when a member of the Black guerrilla family invaded her home armed with a gun.
On the forced entry into the household, the gunman asked for Faye Stender by name.
Has her sign a document saying that she betrayed George Jackson. I betrayed George Jackson, has her sign it. And then after she signs it, he shoots her full of holes with a handgun. And miraculously, she doesn't die.
In January of 1980, Faye Stender's assailant, ex-convict Edward Brooks, was convicted of attempted murder and robbery and sentenced to 17 years. Brooks was later stabbed to death at Folsom Prison. Not long after the trial, Stender traveled to Hong Kong, where she lived alone. In the spring of 1980, paralyzed and in constant pain, she committed suicide by a drug overdose. Faye Stender was 48 years old. Stephen Bingham returned to America in 1984 to reclaim his life, ready to stand trial.
I'm very confident that a jury is going to acquit me.
Bingham's trial began in April of 1986 at the Marin County Courthouse. He denied the allegations against him. By summer, the jury had reached its verdict. Bingham was found not guilty of 3 counts of murder and conspiracy.
It's relief. It's just joy and relief. I'm vindicated, but on another level, you're never really vindicated.
At the age of 44, Bingham resumed the practice of law, and at present is an attorney for a San Francisco legal aid center.
A handful of supporters were on hand to greet Johnny Spain when he left the state prison at Vacaville.
In March of 1988, Johnny Spain regained his freedom when he was released from prison. Spain's conviction for murder as one of the San Quentin Six was overturned by a federal judge. Today, Spain is a consultant for criminal justice issues and teaches civics at an alternative high school in San Francisco. Angela Davis is a professor of the history of consciousness at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Davis is also involved in the prison abolition movement. Officers Kenneth McCrae and Charles Breckenridge resigned from San Quentin not long after their ordeal and eventually departed California. Officer Urbano Rubiaco remained with the Department of Corrections and after a brief time also resigned. Soledad brother John Cluchet is an inmate at the California State in Lancaster. Incarcerated since 1980, Cluchet is serving a life sentence for a drug-related murder. "56-year-old Alan Mancino is serving time for armed robbery at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola. Mancino's projected release date of 2007 is a reminder that his years behind bars have been filled with so many forgotten days and nights. But the memory of that terrible day in August, over 30 years ago, will remain with him forever.
You don't constantly think about it every day, but when you lay down in your rack at night, you close your eyes, and you get to thinking, where's so-and-so, and one thing reminds you of another, and there it is. You think about it, and I'm sure every man that was in there that day thinking about it, every one of them know what happened, whether they was on the receiving end or the giving end.
To what extent did George Jackson contribute to his own demise? Had a $70 robbery wasted his life? Had years of abuse between captor and captive raged like a sickness, leading to a final exchange of hatred? Placed in the context of 4 centuries of racial injustice, was August 21st, 1971 a revolt, murder, or one more horrifying symbol of America's historic inability to address the burden